you've heard there's loads of sayings, the great resignation, quiet quitting, and now there's this term being used.
Taglines for everything nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's called career cushioning.
Right.
Have you heard of it?
Which one was called?
Career cushioning.
No. Tell me more.
So career cushioning is essentially...
Wow, you came back. Welcome to Talent Surgery, episode 2. I'm Steve Jacobs. This is...
Yasar Ahmad. Nearly forgot my name there.
And we are joined today with Christine Ng. Christine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine from Quantum Motion. I have spent the last 10 years in recruitment working across a variety of companies of different shapes and sizes, ranging from Yieldify, which is a high-growth startup, FT more recently, and Quantum Motion, which is a 27-person small hardware computing startup.
Cool.
Nice.
Very, very cool.
Very cool. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Yes.
Likewise. This is really professional. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? We love it. And you brought us gifts.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't believe it. This is like only our episode 2 and someone brought us gifts.
I really
love
want to
that.
open one.
I think we should. All
We
open
should,
one. Huh?
yeah.
I just want to say though, we're not sponsored by them, so
No. What did you bring us?
We should be. So it's kombucha. So I got really ill over the summer and I started focusing on gut health, and
Okay.
kombucha came up as one of the key things to help with gut health. So
Did everyone hear that?
yeah.
not beers at 9 a.m., by the way.
Yeah.
Why not?
Kombucha, sparkling ginger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strawberry and pineapple for me.
It's actually really nice.
Kombucha
right.
Warehouse.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I got that. That hit my throat good.
Yeah.
Ginger. Well, look, thank you so much. And you mentioned your Quantum Motion, right? And your job title there?
Is head of talent and media.
What does that mean, media?
I
Yeah.
know. I get that a lot.
Just throw on there.
I get that a lot. So talent, of course, encompasses like TA, talent management as well at the moment. And the media part initially set out to be more employer brand, but I actually manage everything from Twitter and LinkedIn. So effectively, I run social media as well. And I think when I interviewed for the role, I made it very clear I am not a social media person, but
Right.
what I can approach it from a candidate perspective. And
Right.
because no one else is doing it, I effectively now run everything social.
So does that mean you do the employer branding side
Yeah.
and the marketing for the business?
Yeah, but the thing is, because we don't have a product yet, we're still in research and development phase. So the marketing is really technical papers and the write-ups that the team comes up with. And actually, I also coordinate our PR. But we have a PR agency that's dedicated to, contacting media agencies and whatnot. So I coordinate all the little bits in between.
That's just skills
Do
transfer.
you ever clash with
galore.
marketing because of that?
Yeah.
We don't have a marketing team, though.
right.
That's the
So
thing. So
you're the CMO as well,
Pretty
basically.
much, yeah. So learning a lot along the way.
I love that. Ownership.
That's evidence if you're in the recruitment space,
Yeah.
the transferable skills
Yeah.
are insane, right?
Yeah.
So you do
100%.
marketing, PR, and
Yeah.
talent acquisition, employer branding, and everything else.
Yeah,
Wow,
and-
that's amazing.
And you see it as well, because when you're looking at the analytics and the followers on LinkedIn, you see candidates who like the page.
Yeah.
And you're like, actually, I saw them apply as well, like 2 days later. So you can kind of see the trend from
Yeah.
people following your page and then converting to an applicant later on. So yeah, it's quite nice to see the whole holistic overview.
So talent marketing, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Nice.
Very cool.
Is this... Hey, everyone. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like and share this video. So how long have you been with Quantum Motion?
A year and 4 or 5 months. It feels way shorter than that, because when I joined last year, it was during, we're still hybrid at the time and fully remote. And because it's a whole new industry, I think the first 6 months was pretty much just getting up to speed, trying to figure out what they actually do.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was in a front row seat of a physics lecture most of the time, because I was the first non-technical person or first non-technical hire. So I only felt proud of the team this January this year.
And so for those who don't know,
Yeah.
me included, Quantum Motion is about quantum computing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is quantum computing?
Good question.
Yeah, I will try to say it in the most non-technical way, not that I'm technical at all. So classical computers, which is what we use right now,
Yeah.
our phones, our laptops, operate in a very kind of binary way, ones and zeros, right? And in quantum computing, what's meant to happen is there's a third state, what they call superposition, which is 1 and 0s at the same time. So what is a use case of that? It would be something like banks have started acquiring quantum computers. The MOD just acquired a quantum computer as well. So it'll be things like breaking cryptography. So let's say at the moment, if you want to break into a phone or passwords, it takes, 3 months, right? Because of all the different algorithms and all the different patterns. But with a working quantum computer, it'll take 3 seconds. So
Makes sense why they
yeah. So you would think companies who need these massive, who are dealing with massive data sets, like in banks, when you're dealing with high frequency trading, drug discovery, protein modeling, and whatnot. These are the kind of use cases I think for quantum computing.
But how do you stop hackers getting a hold of it?
Yeah, that is a good question.
That's
a good question, and I think you see things like Bitcoin and whatnot. But I think being in this industry for a bit, these are purely academics,
right?
And I like to think in academics they've got really strong academic integrity. So at some point, maybe when it's open source and it's out there in the open, you don't know what's going to happen. But at the moment, the whole industry is still very nascent, so it's still very much an R&D, and it's still very in a very small group of people are working on this.
Kind of like when DeepMind was very small.
Kind of just at the time. So I don't know, maybe 10 years from now we'll see what.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, like I'm learning every day, and I think that's what keeps me going. I ask questions like, why is this? What is quantum computing? Why are we doing it this way? And I think working in web development for the last 10 years, I always put software developers on a pedestal. But with this group of people, they code for fun. So they'd be doing things in the lab and experimentation work, and they'll be like, okay, well, we'll run into a problem, and they just hack some Python code in 5 minutes in order to automate something. You're like, how do you do that?
That's the kind of stuff you see in the movies.
Do you know what I mean?
That must be so motivating, though.
It is. It is, and
type of environment.
It is, and over lunch, you're talking about anything super technical. They talk about how CCTV was first built in MIT, apparently from physicists who wanted to monitor their coffee machine, right? So you learn all these really random things, but I love it. I think when you're working in tech and you're working with such incredible people, it just motivates you to.
Is this what it sounds like? But putting Quantum Motion on the spot here, is this your favorite job?
Yeah, well, yes, it is. I loved every single role I've been in, and I think looking back my career, every opportunity that came, it's always a reason for me to learn about a new industry. I've never stayed in the same industry, and I think the thing with Quantum Motion is having the autonomy and from my role, not just doing talent, but also doing all these other different elements, but actually just being in the deep end with the team and seeing what they're doing has been incredible. And I think also being mission driven and knowing that the impact of the work that we're going to do is ultimately going to impact things like drug discovery. So it's going to be incredible. And also, at the moment we have the cost of living crisis, energy crisis. What we're also going to do is impact how everything's going to be stored in the future. So our work is pretty much, our thesis is storage can be held in the size of a chip, like a 3mm chip. So actually we have a chip design team as well. So imagine how data storage is going right now. You've got massive data centers, lots of energy usage, right? Everyone's online. Everyone's storing all this random information everywhere. But in the future, if everything can just be in a really, really small
So this
chip,
is the future of hardware.
It's going to be the future of hardware. So in the future, you're going to power everything with, 100x less energy than what's going to be used, like what we're using right now. That's going to impact how we're going to change.
That's amazing. I mean, if they're able to reduce the size of an electricity box in a house,
or even bills,
yes, that would be awesome because then I've got more space to basically put in my cupboard.
I always feel like you get a new laptop,
you
get a new MacBook,
and
it's still just as slow as the last one.
The
software's bigger and bigger.
Or are we slowing down as we get older? I'm not sure.
Right. But it's just so interesting. I got my iPhone, and if I rewind back to 10 years ago when I had my first phone, I had significantly less 500 meg.
What phone was it?
I can't even remember.
It's like a Nokia.
It was one of those
big ones.
Let's say a BlackBerry.
Oh, BlackBerry. I love a BlackBerry.
You know the BlackBerries?
Yeah.
I know.
They have the little
Yeah,
cards.
Yes, I love
I used to have one of those, and now I've got 500 gig on my phone, but I'm using it all up. 10,000 photos. And
I won a competition once, and it was a newspaper competition. And the prize.
What's the newspaper?
No, it was. I don't want to say the name of the actual newspaper. You see, I'm embarrassed. But I entered this competition, and I won two things. I won a moped, which was completely random. I sold the moped. I didn't need it. But the phone that I got was one of the most. It was an original camera phone, except it was. I think it was orange, and you had to connect the camera piece separately to the bottom of the like you had to clip it in, and it was so funny.
Wow.
Like 0.9 megapixel, you know, like really old.
It's like when you think back on it, I know it's going to sound very old, but like the technology is just insane. And just talking about what you just mentioned there, and even now, like this week, I've just seen an influx of those AI pictures.
Oh yeah.
We should put the AI.
It seems to be a big trend at the moment, right? Like,
everybody's got the AI picture. I remember you mentioning it 2 weeks ago, and I'm thinking, what is he talking about? And then that's it. My feed is constant AI pictures, people looking so buff and like.
But you got to question, why are people
Very
comfortable putting their own photos online? Like, where is it going? You know, I always gonna ask myself that.
I guess it's for fun.
I think AI will get to a point where we can. You know, we don't need to do this podcast to do it for us. The deep fake element of it.
Oh my God, that's scary.
And the AI chats that you can see now.
Yeah.
I was reading about, is it called Chat something?
Yes. And this whole GPT-3, that was the last one.
And then what happens is the initial, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm probably butchering the whole explanation, but the AI creates the chat, and then there's like a check where it kind of checks if it's human or not, and basically it only allows the chat that passes this kind of test where it's like, okay, this is good enough to be human. So if you think about it, it's just getting more and more sophisticated. Eventually the script, the language, you already see on TikTok, you can see like you know, use captions and it speaks on your behalf, and the voice sounds so real. How much time before me and you don't need to do this?
No, I know.
I can't wait. It'll be so much cheaper.
And time would stand still as well. It'll be you 10 years ago, like your image.
Speaking of your AI, we may have an AI specialist on one of our episodes very soon.
Teaser.
So just jumping into some of the questions around your role and your history, especially as a talent acquisition professional. We usually like to ask this question. I think this is the second episode, so it's not usually, but what's your favorite productivity hack as a talent acquisition professional?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I use a variety of different things, but definitely when I started out, Boomerang was great. So it's a kind of Gmail plugin. Because obviously, you know, we work around the clock, and I find it weird sometimes when I want to respond to emails at 10 p.m. And if you're promoting a good work-life balance and your talent person sending you emails at 10 p.m., that's not a great look. So I just schedule it for first thing in the morning at 8 a.m. But Boomerang is also great in the sense where it sends you reminders. So let's say this is a super strong candidate. They're not looking for another 3 months. You can set it to Boomerang back to you in 3 months' time, right on the spot. Cool. So bam, bam. Cool. And you forget about that person, right, at that point. So you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot about this person. Okay, hey, how are you getting on? So that's one of my favorite ones.
Chrome add-on?
Yes, it's a Gmail add-on, Boomerang. So if you use Gmail, it's...
Nice. Because I usually do a to-do list and just keep adding and adding. It's never ending.
Exactly.
I'm old school. I just have my notes.
Exactly.
Just like plug everything into my normal calendar. That's my reminders.
Yeah.
It serves its purpose.
Yeah. But
does the job.
Just get so long, like you said, and it gets so overwhelming. You look at
But Boomerang, I guess, is great from an automation perspective, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And I think if you're speaking to so many different people on a daily basis, it just helps. And if your ATS isn't as sophisticated enough to remind you, then...
So we've got these new call cards, haven't we?
We do, yeah.
And I put the questions on there, and I'm looking at them thinking, Steve, are you going to go next?
Are you not happy with your questions?
I'm happy with my questions, but I'm also like...
All right, so I'm gonna jump in. I'd like to jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
What do you think people misunderstand about you?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think normally I'm quite... zen and very diplomatic in a workplace environment. But I think one thing, it's actually when I'm dealing with, say, agencies, right? And it always happens when I'm starting a new role, or at least rather the last 2 roles, where there's an existing portfolio of agencies that hiring managers have worked with in the past. So they'll be like, oh, you know, I've already worked with this company. They've delivered XYZ. So the first meeting with the agencies, right? I think they see there's little Asian girl. Yeah, let's just kind of bully her with the terms. So I just usually stay quiet, but what they don't know is that I'm a very good negotiator. So you just hardball them during the meeting and afterwards, and I always pull out all the stops. Like, we're a startup. We can't afford 20%. But what we'll do is we'll go 15% the first time, and if you make 2 or 3 hires, then maybe we'll consider 20%. So it's a kind of silent negotiations. I think that's one thing.
Do you find that, because you said there something that just triggered me in a bit in a weird way, like you this kind of stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you get stereotyped quite, like discriminated at work a lot?
Yes and no. I think I've been quite grateful in most of the companies I've been in. I've been, in quite a supportive culture. But I think especially in TA and, especially with our stakeholders we work with, i.e. agencies, it's filled with a lot of quite male, very dominant kind of male ego type behaviors, right? So I think when you're in there, they just assume that you're going to be super, that might be a pushover in that sense. And I think I start off that way, just kind of let them, I kind of assess how they're going to react, and then I kind of go in a bit later. But yeah, I do get that. I was actually invited to a talk a couple months ago about microaggressions at work.
Okay.
And I was thinking about it. I was like, have I actually ever experienced microaggressions at work? And, you think about it, I see it in my colleagues, where they're blatantly being told like, oh, you're Asian, you do things a certain way. And apparently that's a microaggression, right? But because you're used to it, you don't question it. But I would say yes, I've definitely, you have this Asian trope like, oh, you work really hard, or, you don't take holidays type scenario. But yeah, I would say in my career, you get that.
It's a tricky one, because I think we're human, right? And we're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. But I think in those circumstances, if people can take the feedback and you give that person feedback who's talking in that way,
definitely,
then you're actually helping them. Right?
Yeah.
I had someone once say to me, you should smile more because you're quite dark-skinned.
What?
Yeah.
No.
And you come across quite intimidating.
I think you should smile more because you've got a lovely smile.
I know,
I thought that would have worked more. But I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is so annoying.
Yeah.
Like, why do you feel the need to tell me to smile more?
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can tell me, like, you need to be more friendly, you should be a bit more energetic, people look up to you, you're a role model.
Asian.
Well, I think it was more the color thing. I just felt like it was a bit unnecessary.
Really?
And the thing is, there's so many people at work right now who think what they're saying is okay, who think it's appropriate to behave in a certain way, and it's like, how do you educate people to do that? Reflect.
It's very... how can I put this? Depending on who your circle of friends are, not your work friends. If you've grown up with different cultures, diversities, etc., from a young age, I did. I was very multicultural where I lived. And you get used to a certain way of how you talk to your friends. Because it would be classified as banter within that circle. I think some folks will take that further into their work environment, but they shouldn't. And I think they don't know how to kind of split that away.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I guess that's where psychological safety comes in, right? Because, at the FT, they do this really well. So they have like open employee listening sessions. You have certain employee resource groups go out and go on stage with internally and talk about some of their experiences. So if you're able to say, okay, well, these are experiences and this is actually how you should approach it, call them out on it at the time, say how it makes you feel. That's the whole psychological safety element, right? But I think you're right in the sense that, you grew up in a very multicultural culture, but the reality is some people didn't, right? No. So is it their fault if they're coming to work and they're actually genuine, maybe just curious, right?
What's the worst thing you've experienced in terms of discrimination?
God. And this is in a work environment or a non-work environment?
Either or.
It could be either.
Like, how did it make you feel?
Yeah, I would say it was outside of work. Because at work, I think, I kind of take everything with a pinch of salt, right? So when things happen, I'm quite confident to say, look, that's not cool. But I would say the worst thing, definitely, it was during COVID, because of course it originated in China. I'm from Hong Kong, now part of China. But it was, I think, when everything opened up again. And we went to Whitstable to have oysters. And because we were all wearing masks, someone on the platform actually made a gesture, like pulling their eyes up at me, and I didn't see it. But my friend I was with at the time actually said something. I called him a fancy word, and I looked over. I'm like, well, what happened? And he didn't want to tell me at the time because he thought I was gonna be upset. But it was maybe a couple months later. I was like, what actually happened? He said, yeah, that happened to you on the train. Like someone actually outwardly made a gesture towards you, and I think it made me feel really upset because obviously. Yeah, I know it originated from China. Everyone's wearing masks, but why is it like aimed towards me? So I think that made me feel really powerless in the sense where, it's something we're all dealing with, but yeah, I couldn't quite put my finger on how that would impact me. And reading the news as well that week on BBC, like there was also a Chinese student from UCL who got beaten up that same week from a group of other kids because of COVID as well. So I think there was just so much anger about lockdowns and everything happening that I think people were just picking on Chinese people. That just as a society as a whole. And I think there's now a group that's come out like anti-Asian hate and whatnot. And it's not just in the UK, like in the US as well. Yeah. And actually in the US, they're targeting elderly people, which is even worse. These are people who can't even fight for themselves, right? At least with us, we're young.
They're not happy people, are they?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's something going on.
Yeah, so I think that was probably one of the worst things I've experienced.
Sounds horrible.
That sounds, I mean,
sorry to.
Yeah, no. And I was glad I was with friends who were able to stand up for me and I didn't see what happened because I think if I saw what happened, I genuinely would have just not known what to do.
It's interesting you talking about friends who could stand up for you because in the workplace we now see a lot of focus on allies.
Yeah.
And I remember reading you're quite big on D&I inclusion, L&D and everything. Can you talk about your journey on L&D and D&I? How did that come about?
Yeah, again, it's very much at the FT because I think in my previous roles it's very much when you're hiring, you're certain goals that you need to hit, and D&I was kind of always in the background and not necessarily in forefront. So it was when I joined the FT, and I think as a talent person you have a bias for action, right? You've got 50 roles you got to hire for, jumping straight into it, and my manager at the time, who was a global head of L&D, was like, whoa, hang on a minute, actually don't do anything yet. Take your time, go speak to all the stakeholders, understand what we do here at the FT, and then give us a recommendation and then approach it. I was like, wow, that's never happened to me before. And I suppose because it wasn't a startup, right? Like it wasn't, the urgency to hire wasn't as strong.
Which is funny because actually that's actually the approach that I think most startups should actually take.
I agree.
Take your time, think it through.
100%.
Give yourself space to think.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to rush and rush, look what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing now. When you join startups, you're like rocket ship growth, hockey stick growth. And the reality is when you hire so quickly, what's going to happen? Like we're seeing right now.
It's been going on for years, but
anyway, it's insane.
That's not what we're talking about today.
FT, and they were very big on D&I. So I was very grateful my role, whereas it was with HR, it was with product and tech. And my brief was to actually sit with product and technology teams. So I reported to a dotted line to our chief product officer. And she was a female, of course. And she said to me, right, our goal by 2022, and I joined in 2017, 18. She said, I want us to be a 50-50 gender parity organization by 2022. So by hearing that from her.
Why did she say that?
I think... we were part of something called the Tech Talent Charter, but it's a good question. Second, I think she just wanted to be able to move the needle. So, and we get questioned a lot, like, is it actually good to put a metric on things like this, right?
Well, I'm just curious to know whether or not it was a message from the CEO or...
No, it was her. It was her. I think she just, because she was a senior female leader, she wanted to make sure the organization also, could be as represented.
I've said possible. This, I think a metric, there should be metric quotas, because like you're talking about hundreds of years of misogyny, stereotypes being ingrained into people, and just trying to overturn it overnight by telling people, oh, you should do this. Yeah. It's not going to happen. And you look at a lot of the governments today, look at the US. Like, have they ever had a female president? No. And it's supposed to be the most democratic country in the world. Right? So I think there is stuff you just have to say, look, you have to do this. This is a mandatory requirement. I know a lot of people won't agree with me, and that's fine. But I also think it also, because a product, don't forget, like FT, it's a business newspaper, right? Sure. And you think about, your end users, your readers. The reality is our readers are maybe 48% female still. So if you're not represented itself
in, let's say, the editorial floor, within the tech team itself, how are you supposed to write articles that can resonate to your audience?
Yeah.
Right. So
that's quite interesting what you just said there. So you had a power. The FT had a power where they could potentially use the content that they publish to attract more female talent into their organization.
Yeah. So
did they do that?
They did, because I think they had a particular, what you call it, like not byline, but they had a particular team that was talking about actually like women and money. So during my time there, obviously I didn't work in editorial. I was seconded to editorial, which was great fun. But they were thinking a lot about like financial education, right, and women in negotiation. So there was definitely a focus on that. But just understanding who our users are and how do we build a team that could actually then speak to our
What was
readers.
the end result, by the way? I know he's
By the time I left, I think it was like 42. There was at one point it was 42%, but then you forget there's also attrition.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the stats, you're like, oh great, you're moving the needle, and then people are leaving. So it's always
I see that as a success.
Yeah.
I mean, you did move the needle, right? And you changed the balance.
Yeah.
So I think that's still very well done.
But that's on the gender side. And then, after Black Lives Matter in 2020, we realized, oh my God, we don't have enough representation on the ethnicity level as well. So, we started doing the work there to figure out, okay, well, what can we do there to actually move the needle on ethnicity? Socioeconomic background was another thing, because FT is the FT, you need to pay to read the FT. What we found as well was, if you lived in Tottenham, you can't buy the FT from your local off license. So if you can't actually access the FT in certain parts of the UK, then who's actually going to apply to the FT? They're going to be people of a certain caliber.
I remember being a kid and walking into the newsagent, and I used to see the FT, was it orange? Pink?
Coral pink.
It was like kind of in between. Yeah. And I always used to sit next to the Telegraph, actually. And I'll be like, what is that? Like,
why
is that an
color?
American, is that American news? I was about 12 or 13 years old. And then eventually I actually bought, and I started reading about it, and it was all about, and then I started reading about, that's actually how I started learning about the stock market.
Would you want to work there?
It wasn't, the subject wasn't interesting to me. But I can see why people would want to work there, of course.
Yeah.
You mentioned about social economic background. It reminds me of a speech by David Wallace, and he talks about an older fish goes past two fish, and he says to the two young fish, "How's the water?" And they look at him confused, and they kind of swim on. They're like, "What the hell is he talking about?" And then David Wallace kind of continues his speech, and the central point is that a lot of our realities today is sometimes invisible to us, because the people like that, what you mentioned about the FT, if the people in the organization are in this echo chamber, how it's really hard for them to see the problem that they're causing.
Exactly.
It's kind of, I don't know, imploding on itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because we were about 2,000 people globally. And tech and product, of course, the attrition in tech and product in general in the market, if you get someone for more than 18 months, that's great. But in certain parts of the business, like editorial, commercial, people never leave. They've been there since, early days of business. I think because we've moved offices, like our headquarters used to be in One Southwark Bridge, and then we moved to St. Paul's. And then we were in One Southwark Bridge for like maybe 38 years or something.
I remember, in London.
And there's apparently people from editorial who was there from and we moved back to St. Paul's, which was our original offices back in whenever 80s. There's been people from the original office who went to One Southwark Bridge and then moved back to the new office, our old office. So been there forever.
So I was going to ask you, because everyone asks this question. What's been your biggest failure, and what and what did you learn from it? Actually, I'm not. I'm going to ask you something different.
Okay.
I'm going to twist it around. What's been your biggest success? Tell us about your biggest success. And again, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I would say it's my first in-house role at Yieldify, actually, because I went from agency to Yieldify, and I was initially brought on to support my head of recruitment and all the roles. But because I was so obsessed with all things tech and I actually wanted to build my own startup at the time, which I eventually did. But when she said, I don't want to manage all tech and product roles, can you manage them? I'm like, yeah, of course, I'll take it. And I had access to Hired. So at the time, it was Sophie Edelman as a GM at Hired, and she contacted me. I think Hired was just starting out. And she said, we'll give you 50% discount on your first hire. I'm like, awesome, great. Go on there. Contacted, a couple of people. And the first guy made the hire 50% off. So 50K salary. Maybe the first hire was like 3 or 4K. And he told me on the call, he's like, listen, like my company is not kind of doing that great. I'm like, cool. Can I poach them? He's like, you can give it a go. And it was a massive collaborative effort. So his referee at the time, who was the head of engineering, and I'm obviously calling him to get the reference for this candidate. And my CEO at the time, Jay, was like, ask him if he wants to join us. I was like, at the reference call. He's like, just do it. I was like, okay. So at the end of the reference call, and remember, this guy's Greek, right? So like, used to be military and everything, just super like monosyllabic. So at the end, I'm like, do you want to join us? And he was, you're kidding me, right? And he hangs up the phone on me. But then we as fate would have it, I meet him at an event a couple months later, and he's very different from his LinkedIn profile. We start talking, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're Christine." I'm like, "You're Yasar." And then we end up hiring him as our head of data at Yolify. So that was him with him. But by the end, I think we hired 8 or 9 people from that team.
Wow.
Which, if you think about the cost per hire, it was $4,000 to pretty much hire people. And this is like DevOps, data science, VP. Well, eventually head of engineering, he turned VP of engineering. So that was pretty much like, I would say, an acqui-hire if you kind of look at it that way. But yeah, and apparently my CTO, who moved on to Shazam, still talks about it when he goes on like, yeah, Christine built that team.
Great story.
Much, yeah. So that was my first.
You dropped in there about you being an entrepreneur, and we forgot to mention actually you had a little
early
startup,
days,
right?
early days, side hustle.
And that's Shout Me When.
Yeah. So, long story short, being from Hong Kong, which I mentioned earlier, I needed a visa to work in this country. So when I came back to do my master's, I knew I wanted to stay here. But at the time, I think Theresa May was a Home Office secretary, and she pulled the post-study work visa. So I couldn't stay here for 3 years after. I had 3 months. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And then I was interning at my first agency at the time, and they were too small to even sponsor my visa. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure this out. What am I going to do? So one of the routes then was you could get a graduate entrepreneur visa funded by your university. So I had this idea that was just kind of bubbling, and I just pitched it to my supervisor. She's like, just go for it, see what happens. And I pitched it, and I got it. So I was like, oh my God, so now I've got to work, and then I've got to figure out how I've got to like work out this app at the same time. But thankfully, I was ripe young age of 24, so I had a lot more energy than I do now. Yeah. So I'd be recruiting by day and trying to build this thing by night, which lasted for about 2 years. But Brilliant. It was, go on.
Brilliant, well done.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's amazing.
It's kind of, you've heard there's loads of sayings, the great resignation, quiet quitting, and now there's this term being used.
Taglines for everything nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's called career cushioning.
Right.
Have you heard of it?
Which one was called?
Career cushioning.
No, tell me more.
So career cushioning is essentially having side hustle.
Yeah.
So quiet quitting is like you giving up.
Yeah.
Career cushioning is keeping your options opening, having a second, third, fourth options, mingling, network events, side hustles. But it takes a certain trait to do that. And you mentioned earlier, like you're energetic, but I think there's an element there that inside you have to have some personality traits that really help you succeed. And it's clear you've grown, right? You've grown from where you when you started to now being head of talent and media and taking on more work like media and everything else. What do you think is the most important traits for talent acquisition professionals or people in general to be successful?
Yeah, well, I think in talent specifically, 2 things. If we're looking, I would say like conscientiousness and resilience, right? I think conscientiousness is one thing because, you have these roles, you have to fill it. It's not like you're working in an agency where you're saying, okay, you know what, I can't fill it, forget about it. But when you're in-house, you're dealing with your stakeholders all the time. So if you can't fill it, like what are you going to do, right? And then I think resilience is another. Like you like people say no to you all the time, right? Yeah. And I think even the reality is in this market, people will sign the offer and they still don't show up anyway down the line. So, at some point you got to navigate all this, this murky water. So I would definitely say resilience is the number one thing, especially right now.
Do you feel like that still applies to people joining the industry as well? So new recruiters listening to this right now, what kind of advice would you give them if is it the same, or should they be doubling down on something else? Or
it's hard, and I think starting out in talent, you really have to know your craft, right? And I think if I didn't, actually do the full 360 in the beginning. So when I started an agency, I was uploading CVs into an ATS. It was just very kind of manual admin work. And the reality is, if you haven't done all the different aspects, I feel like you actually can't be a leader, right? Because there are times, when my last role, I managed a team of 2. If they can't source, then you have to jump in and source and actually teach them how to do it. So I think it's really important you understand all the different facets. And you know what? I still upload my own CVs now. I still, go through and clean up all the data and tag everything myself.
But I think it's very important to be, me personally, I'm still very hands-on.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be hands-on so that you can experience what does that whole candidate journey look like.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
How can you tweak it, improve it, and get and make it better for the company and also for the TA team. So actually, it is important to be not just purely strategic, even if you're in a talent director role. Yeah. But you do need to be hands-on. Yeah. Things change.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, you've obviously, like myself, you've run very large teams before.
Yeah, I feel like Jap mentioned this as well, like having the breadth of knowledge and having knowledge on how to do each element of the role of talent acquisition is super important. I think as you get more senior, the less reliant you are on prior experience, the more it's about asking the right questions, making sure people are aligned to a vision, a goal, and you hold them accountable. But if you're growing in your career, I definitely believe just owning your craft and really owning it, doing the 10,000 hours and becoming the master in at least one field is super important, as well as learning more. Like if you're a sourcer, for example, I think personally, if I was a sourcer, I'm not going to try to learn how to employer branding straight away. Unless I'm already very good at sourcing, unless I already know some techniques, unless I'm confident enough to stand in front of people and say, hey, this is what sourcing is. And if I'm still learning about it, trying to drop that and learn something else, I feel like it confuses the mind.
What characteristics do you think then that someone needs in order to be able to do that?
I genuinely think recruiters, you have to have really thick skin. You have to be able to take feedback. And you're always in the wrong.
What about curiosity?
That's very true. Nothing you do is right. Or you could do better. Yeah.
But what about curiosity? For me, being curious actually is probably number 1 or 2 for me. And I love when I'm interviewing people for my team, and I have done, many, many times. I want to see how curious they are. Because that if they are curious, they want to learn more. Right, and they want to improve more. And be genuinely interested in their job and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely.
Because that's how we develop. Right.
What's your biggest fear? In a professional element.
I think it happened, right? 2020. If our roles are purely hiring and companies that pull the plug on hiring, i.e. hiring freezes, whose roles are first to go, ours, right? So,
of course.
And at the FT, we're quite a big talent acquisition team, and product and tech was first to stop with the freeze. So I was put on furlough for 3 months. So I think that was a first taster of, okay, if I've only been at that point, I've only just been doing pure recruitment, right? What do I do next? So that's when you got to start thinking, okay, is there where I pick up other skills? Looking at L&D, looking at coaching, looking at other parts of the employee life cycle. So I think that's my biggest fear is...
So looking back on that, actually, what skills do you think you could have developed before you'd gone into FT to secure yourself?
I would say I wish because I've been just purely doing more TA elements, and we always had an HR business partner in every role I've been in, and I kind of wish I've maybe went more on the other side. And I think that's why I took this role, because it's a full 360. I know either way I'll be okay because I manage the an employee life cycle. So I think, as a pure talent person, you definitely need to flex your wings more than just TA and look at other areas. It could be processes, it could be people systems, it could be employer branding, it could be anything. So that's my my advice.
So you've been working in the industry for 10 years now. Did you have someone to look up to? Did you have a professional mentor that helped you?
I think throughout different stages, I had different people. And I think, Steve, you were actually my first. I don't know if you knew it, but I think that's also the thing with mentoring. I swear I did ask you, Steve, would you be my mentor?
on red now.
Yeah. Well, no, because I think it was when I was in Yieldify, you were at Criteo at the time. So we were operating in a really similar space. And the community we were in at the time, everyone was just starting out and trying to build things. So I remember you were giving me lots of really good advice. I'm like, Steve, like, and I just call you anyway. So I was just like, how do I deal with this? But when you go through different stages in your career, so I think when I was at the FT, it's a much bigger company. You're learning more about influencing others, and I've never really been in that scenario before. So my mentors were really more internal mentors. Now, it's funny we talk about mentors because you also have sponsors.
Yes.
And I didn't really see the impact of that until I went to the FT, because I didn't realize till coming out I had 2 sponsors in the FT who would put me, I ended up in these different scenarios, like at a leadership program or having dinner with Nikkei, who was our owners. And I realized it's people from the top who suggested, okay, get Christine to go to these things.
Okay.
So just for the audience listening, so like a sponsor is?
So a sponsor is someone who actually is not actively your mentor. So you don't go to them for, day-to-day questions, but there's someone who actually vouches for you when you're not in the room.
So they're like an internal ambassador for you, essentially.
Yeah.
So they're shouting about you.
Yeah, when you're not in the room.
When you're not there.
Yeah, and you don't know it until you're in the scenarios, and you kind of think, oh my God, like how did this happen? And
your ears are burning.
It reminds me of that last episode where we talked about that kind of performance image and exposure, having exposure to. So how do you get exposure to those leaders in the first place?
I think when you're in a bigger environment, right, and you're in these massive HR meetings and whatnot, it's actually speaking up. And I really struggle with that, with the self-promotion element, because I always come from the camp of your work will speak for itself. But the reality is when you have so many people, you need to, when the opportunity presents itself, you always take it. So I would go up and talk about, challenges in product and tech hiring and whatnot. So people from the other side who might not necessarily see you might go, oh, okay, she kind of knows what she's talking about. So I think my advice would be, always at any opportunity, shout about what you're doing. Because I think with our work, especially in talent, you're like, oh yeah, people will see our hires and that's it. Like you can see our output, but there's so much work that goes on beyond that, and especially work in D&I, right? People go, oh, you're hiring just another white male again. You're like, well, actually, we're doing all this work in the background. We're posting on this. We're partnering up with these communities. Like they don't know you're doing that until you talk about it.
Have you heard? And I think you'll like this, Steve. Have you heard of this concept called the luck surface area? So there's
I have heard of it.
The luck surface area. Well, I use this technique right now.
Yeah.
So I join a call and I'm with you and you're like, how are you? I'm like, I'm amazing. And the first thing you're like, why?
Yeah, you shock them.
So, and I say, when I give you a carrot, I'm amazing because I've just finished all my hiring for the year and I've got 1 month left.
Yeah.
And what has happened in this conversation is I've just shared information with you. Nice. You've requested it. Yeah. You now have a perception of me. Yeah. You leave the call and you say, well, Yasar's really happy. Yeah. Why is he happy? And what it does is it increases your luck, because what happens is you're getting more people thinking positively around you. Yeah. So when they need someone to rely on, when they need someone to go to for support, they're thinking, well, I know he does his job well. Yeah. And I know he has achieved well.
It's a butterfly effect.
Yeah. And I think I like the positive side of things as well, because I guess everyone at work is always stressed about something.
Always negative. Yeah. Always.
So if you're coming at from a positive angle, like people want to go to you anyway. Yeah. By default.
How many times have you asked someone, how are you today? Oh, no.
Busy.
No. Didn't ask that. I asked, how are you? Like, people don't really know that, how to answer that question, because it's not, again, it's not normal for us to go, I'm feeling amazing.
Yeah.
Like, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
so I love that.
Different. Yeah.
But then we go to a candidate and say, hey, I got this amazing job. And they're like, screw you.
Yeah. I mean, this is it, right? Being authentic.
Yeah. 100%.
Agreed.
I'm looking at you and you're looking
at me. Yeah, I know.
I want to do this, right? So we put together a this and that.
Okay.
Right. And so we're going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
No pressure.
You've got to choose which one. So I'll go with the first 3.
All right.
So straight onto it. Would you rather instantly become a successful startup founder or instantly become a CEO of a major company?
Ooh, I would say startup founder. As you already know, I tried to kind of build my own company. So definitely that, because I think I'll scratch that itch. Because I think for the latter, you got to think about like change management, performance management, influencing. You're inheriting a team, so that's going to be a lot trickier to manage.
Nice.
Change management. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Would you rather always sit by the printer or always sit by the water cooler at the office?
Oh my God. I would prefer to be by the water cooler, but I'm always by the printer. How about that?
Be the best in the world at a skill or a job of your choice, but have no work-life balance, or be mediocre at work and have a great work-life balance?
Oh, it's at the moment, I would say mediocre and work-life balance. But I think my answer would be different if you asked me 2 years ago.
All right, my turn.
Yeah.
So, would you rather work an extra hour and get 2 hours of break time, or work with no breaks and leave the office an hour early?
I would say extra hour and 2 breaks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you can your friends can always meet you whenever,
Exactly.
like, right? So I'm not too fast. It's not like I'm in a situation where I've got kids, so I'm not there yet.
Okay. Would you? Oh, this is quite a good one. I like this one. I forgot I wrote it down.
Okay.
Would you rather live 10 minutes away from a mediocre job, or commute 2 hours to your dream job? We won't say where you live at the moment.
But is it a hybrid dream job
Oh, well.
or remote?
No.
No.
No, it's fully
Fully in the
Oh
office.
my
in the office.
God.
It's your dream job.
Like pre-COVID.
Jesus,
Pre-COVID.
I would say commute to the dream job.
Okay.
But I'm very lucky because I've now got my dream job and I walk to work and have
Yeah. You got it both. Basically, you got the best of both
Exactly,
worlds, right?
so, yeah.
Amazing.
That warrants a pay rise.
I know, and because thing is, our chips are named after different towns, not towns, different areas of London. So our first chip was called Bloomsbury. Our second chip is called Hoxton. So our second chip, when I launched, I just moved to this area. So my boss is like, "Are you just moving everywhere where our chips are called?" I'm like, "Yeah, why don't we do that, right?" So yeah.
Okay. And finally, would you rather get paid a year's salary at once, or get paid in installments throughout the year?
Ooh, I would say installments. I don't trust myself with like a big fund in one go.
What would you do?
I want the money now. There's a great question that I get asked, and it's similar to this, which is, would you rather have £3,000 per month or per week, per month for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have £1 million now? And I'd much rather have the £1 million now because I can make an impact with that. That's my kind of investing side.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm thinking like, okay, I'll put 50 grand here. I'll put 50 grand.
It depends on how entrepreneurial minded you are, right?
Yeah.
If you know that something is, if you know an industry that you know that you can make a return on, then of course you probably would take that money. And
I think especially in this market, like in a bear market, you can do it.
But you just touched a really sensitive subject about money.
Yeah.
Go on.
And during an inflation time, right?
Yeah.
If I were to give you 100 grand, what would you do it? You're a very savvy individual, so let's give the
I can't give too much away. I don't want everyone doing the same thing. But I would say that during.
This is not
by the way,
but I'm red banner.
I would say that now is a great time to invest.
I agree.
The downturns are the best time to invest
and start companies.
And potentially start companies. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of time and research, and if you're not savvy, but if you're not used to doing it, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Learn, but don't do it yet. It happens every 10 years.
Yeah.
You may not be able to invest now heavily, but in 10 years time, actually 8 to 10 years time, you'll be able to, use that money.
Yeah.
If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn,
investment advice.
I can tell you that. There's always opportunities, and that's it. It's about how to spot the opportunity, which people do.
Yeah.
I hear some great stories.
Yeah.
Next thing you do, we're inviting people to a WhatsApp group, sending the signals.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think we're very lucky we work in tech because I think we see the trends a lot. So if anyone invests in, let's say, tech stocks, I think we see everything that's happening. So you should be able to make an educated guess.
It's not always about tech stocks. That's the thing. Everyone thinks that you're going to make a lot of money from tech stocks. But actually, when you look at the tech stocks, they have a much faster decline than others.
Yeah.
Than FMCG or oil and gas, much quicker.
But that's because they have more face time on news and media channels, like the layoffs, for example.
Yeah.
They're predominantly tech layoff.
Yeah.
And so
That we know of, yeah.
Yeah, and that we know of. But when you speak to others in other industries, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
No.
Still bad, but it's not as bad. And I think with tech companies, it's very much stock markets are really much just like how people feel, right?
Yeah.
It's not always an accurate indication of how well a company's doing.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so risky to invest in stocks if you're not used to it, don't know what you're
Don't
doing.
do it.
And so don't do it. So what should they do? Should they be investing
I'm not telling
in
you,
themselves?
No. If you want to find out, like I said,
The next episode.
Yeah.
become a sponsor, and then maybe we'll FT. No.
Yeah.
Hey, they're listening maybe.
So you managed, you're managing people, you've managed people in the past?
In the past, yeah, not at the I mean, at the moment, I've got like an office manager. So in a way, it's very interlinked, office experience, people experience. But yes, in the past.
And how do you manage, how would you go about managing teams now, considering that there's so much demand at work from the workforce, from their employer, and, this kind of almost expectation of like, you need to be teaching me new things, you need to be helping me. There's a lot of recruiters out there, for example, who want to learn more, don't have the opportunity, but I just feel like, well, I'll leave and I'll go so-and-so. Have you ever experienced that kind of?
Thankfully, no, because I think my previous team, either you hire recruiters who are already really autonomous and they know what they're doing. But when I was at FT, the first one I got was a coordinator, and then I had someone seconded to me from actually marketing, became an employer brand person. So I had to kind of teach them from the ground up. I guess that might answer your question. I think we're very lucky in our ecosystem. There's so many events and conferences and just free webinars and whatnot. So as I mentioned earlier, either you teach them, all right, you source alongside them and you get them to listen on your calls, go to all the debriefing meetings and intake meetings, like get them to do the whole cycle with you, or you get them to go to conferences and actually network with other people. Because I think for me, actually, it was actually joining the community and seeing from other companies and what they're doing got me more motivated. Because you don't realize if you're a solo kind of recruiter what you're not doing until you speak to other people.
Yeah.
Right. So that might also be your curiosity.
No, yeah. Thank God we do live in an age right now where there is so much content and so many reach outs that we can do. Where people are much more open minded than they were before. I think it's much more of a sharing, caring approach now than it was back in the 80s. Probably.
But I think this might go back to your curiosity element. If you hire someone that's curious by nature, you say, okay, well, this is give them the foundation, and they should be able to go off and figure it out, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to manage expectations as well, don't you? I think there is an element where, as you grow in your career, you become a manager. Managing expectations is like the most important skill there is, because there's always going to be this kind of internal conflict between teams. I always find that, interestingly, TA teams tend to work really well with each other, but then as soon as it goes to like people admin, comp and ben, or another team, it starts to become a bit
us and them. We got that
segregated.
And it shouldn't be, really. And you think of it that way, you're getting the talent in, and really the retention part goes with HR. You should really.
You've all got the same goal.
Exactly.
Why aren't you doing it together? But I think people just want to. There are some groups that like to stand out a bit more, and
it's always a TA teams are a bit more extroverted, though.
I have this recent story where my son and I've got 3 kids. So my youngest and my oldest tend to fight, or they'll argue with each other. And I've started to use this thing where I say to him, okay, to my oldest, do you want to pour water on that, or do you want to pour petrol on it? And it kind of really visual element. He's like, water? And I'm like, yeah. So like, what is water? He's like, well, I'll just say sorry. And I say sorry. And I remember reading it in a newsletter by Sahil Bloom.
Yes, I love Sahil Bloom's content. Amazing. So good.
I think it was from him. And now I've started to adopt it at work where, I'm telling people, I'm like, hey, look, I know you're frustrated, but would you rather put water on that or petrol? And it's such a great visualization for individuals to realize, okay, actually, let me step away. And let me see how I'm going to approach this situation. I feel like expectation management, especially when it's like within teams or with other teams, you kind of have to constantly find ways to explain to people, look, what are you trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I think you also run the risk. I've been in teams in the past because I think as recruiters, everyone knows what their goals are. You're very operational. And sometimes you run the risk of, well, I've done it this way and everyone else I know does it this way. But if someone else doesn't do it that way, you're a bit like, well, what am I missing here? But that's where the whole learning and coaching part comes in, right? Again, it's kind of like, well, it's not their fault or they haven't learned that particular way. Like, it's up to you to help them get there.
Yeah.
And I've seen teams kind of disintegrate so quickly because you have maybe people have been historically in-house and then you've got new agency recruiters who are very go, right? So already that kind of creates a very different dynamic because the in-house teams, I think, places more emphasis on, stakeholder management, looking at data, whereas the external agency recruiters are like, well, we got to place these roles, right? So yeah, how do you kind of manage that dynamic as well?
Would you say that you're a creature of habit? What habits do you have?
What, work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you look at my calendar, it's color coded. So I'm maybe a little bit OCD at work, potentially. The habits I have, I would say I try not to do any.
OCD or organized?
Borderline OCD, but I would say organized now. In the morning, I try not to do any calls, just focus on like more strategic work. So that's my red on my calendar. It's like no calls at all.
Can we see? I want to, because I've got something I want to show you, and I think
Yeah.
we suddenly are
What are
matching.
you using? What are you using?
I'm
I know you've downloaded some super app.
no
like,
look at my color
Oh,
coding.
There you go. Yeah. So
Where
that's
do
what
we
it
show
looks
that?
like. So purple
Where
is
to show
fun
the
time.
camera?
Oh, there. Yeah. Which way am I going? That way?
I just
Yeah,
use
that's
the color coding. So green is my free time.
Green's free time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Purple's mine. And then yellow's like calls. Or yellows are these things I need to go into and,
So yellow's
Contribute.
my commute time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's quite. I have something called it's an accountability tracker. So it's like 10,000 steps a day, etc. But it's quite similar, right? Like you do things for 30 days, and then that they do say if you slip up one day, don't be too hard on yourself and just get back at it the next day.
Correct.
But I think that's the hardest thing is the day you slip and then you go really hard on yourself and you're
Like
like,
when
you know what, I'm not going to do it
when you
again.
go to the gym, if you're a consistent gym goer,
Yeah,
that one day can really break your cycle.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
suddenly that one day turns into 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's Christmas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, winter's the hardest, right?
Yeah.
No, I love Christmas. I find like the hoodie weather is great. too.
Snuggles. It's called what we call it in our house, like snuggle time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, love it. Do your companies have branded hoodies?
We do. We have a
We've branded everything, no?
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah,
Swag.
HelloFresh has got like everything.
Yeah.
Are you expecting some?
Well, we are. That's why I'm wondering. Like, and is it a Patagonia hoodie? Like, we're just really tied on what kind of hoodie we want to get, and we can't decide as a brand what we are.
I don't know. I'm conflicted with swag
Yeah.
because
Look at a poll.
I worked
Everyone loves a poll.
a company called Zalando.
Yeah.
And they're very focused on sustainability. I think actually pretty much my entire career has been focused on sustainability, right? I even did my dissertation on
Nice.
the fashion industry being sustainable.
Yeah.
And I feel like swag for me, I'm slightly conflicted. I understand the benefits for it, but I feel like the fast fashion, it's wasted.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be able to say, look, everyone, we didn't want to get you brand new swag, so we got you vintage stuff.
Nice.
And we
Yeah, that's
printed
great.
on it.
Yeah.
But not everybody
That's
feels the
great,
same way.
Yeah. Interesting you say that because I read an article actually just the other day, a startup, I forgot the name, maybe Ghibli or something, focused on Gen Z. And they were saying actually Gen Z talent are not expecting company swag or even conference swag. I think the title was, is conference swag, the gone are the days of conference swag. So instead of actually buying swag, what the company can do is put the money into this company and the company will then invest in kind of various things. So you then have this badge on your website saying, oh, we're part of this Ghibli program. So rather than buying company swag, we're now invested in
Recycled
planting a tree
swag
or
just
something.
hasn't been created yet.
But I like the recycled
good.
swag idea.
But
But
I think-
sometimes I just want a hoodie.
I think it was, I can't remember the chap's name. He was doing a presentation at one of these events and he was talking about a company called Newton.
Yeah.
And they found that the swag that like career fairs was
Yeah.
just being taken,
Yeah.
great, and then you go outside and
It's
it'll
all
roll around the
outside.
bin.
Yeah.
So what they did was they created they got this van and they gave out like 25,000 coffees, chocolate chip cookies,
Yeah.
and those people appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's like come for a coffee, leave with a career.
Yeah.
And it was a great slogan. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, it's not swag,
Yeah.
but it would be really clever if, let's say, for instance, I don't know, this kombucha had a HelloFresh logo on it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
that would be
sure.
pretty cool. Yeah, I think that kind of stuff would be.
It's much more subliminal.
Yeah, I find swag great,
can
but
recycle
for
it.
about 5
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
swag is very, and please send us lots of swag. But
I'll take it.
I do like how it's evolved. So like recently I started getting lots of these Tide chips, not chips, like what are they called? The
USB?
Tide, no, not USB. It's like tracking things, which is great because if I lose my bag or something.
Air tags.
They're like air tags, but they're called Tide. I think it's
Really?
Tide. Yeah.
I have not heard
Tile, sorry, Tile, not Tide.
Can
Yeah.
you put them in your suitcase and stuff?
You can put them in a suitcase and everything. They're
Okay, I
great.
actually need one.
And actually, I find that really useful.
Yeah, I definitely need one.
Definitely.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Useful swag. Basically.
Yeah.
Basically, iPads, laptops,
MacBooks,
monitors.
SLR cameras.
Basically, build out
Kombucha.
my office for me.
Wallets.
We'll send you a chair.
An ergonomic chair I'll take.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you know how important it is to have a good chair?
Yeah.
Very important.
So we're coming up to the end of this episode.
We are.
And
just sad. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. Great.
it's funny,
Thursday
isn't
morning
it?
chat.
Time just flies
I know.
by. You don't realize.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have you on again. But before we kind of get to the end, I guess Steve asked this very important question last time. Now we're going to ask.
Okay.
What has been your most embarrassing moment in the recruitment space?
Oh my God. You know what? I think it's my first ever hire ever in the world of talent. It was when I was working in an agency. And because I think I mentioned first 3 months I was doing ATS uploading, so I wasn't actually even on the phone. So I finally got on the phone, made my first hire, like everything all kind of worked out, super excited. Actually, I think the candidate was from Criteo, but was in Criteo in the past. So, that already kind of narrows the field. And I was so excited. I'm like, great, first ever hire. Everyone's kind of celebrating. And then, I don't remember what happened. Something happened that it turned out he actually didn't work there anymore. And the hiring manager was like, can you just figure out like what's happened here, So my manager at the time was like, okay, let's give him a call. Maybe give him a chance to explain, right? Because the candidate was all like, oh, I've already handed in my notice. All's good. So I remember asking him, like, what even happened? They're like, they tried to counter offer me, like this whole shebang. So my manager was like, maybe he went to another role or consulting another company. But ask him specifically, did he hand in his notice at Criteo? And I asked that. And he's like, yeah, like that's what happened. And I think apparently my whole face just went red. And I've never... bear in mind, this is my first foray into talent world. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? So I was like, look, this is really awkward, but they know you haven't worked there in a while. So I kind of need to explain to them what this gap, according to CV, it's not in your CV, but I explained to them. And he was just fumbling on the other side.
Oh no.
And I was like, look, you just have one, or just tell me what happened. And he's like, yeah, well, I actually left last year and I've been doing other things and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I wish you told me this earlier because now it makes me look bad. It makes you look bad. And of course, they pulled the offer. So my first ever offer didn't even go through. But I think, again, that's the resilience bit, right? Like if that was my first ever experience, then it can only just go up from there.
I feel
that was really bad.
like there's such an important lesson there.
Yeah.
I always feel like honesty is the best policy.
Yeah.
You've always said this to me as well. Like,
whether it's bad or good feedback doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Always got to be honest.
And we're on your side, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, like we're not trying to.
I think that's candidates sometimes they feel that because we've been a candidate, right?
Yeah.
So I think they feel that we're against them. We don't want them. It's not about that.
Yeah. Like let us know.
We want to help you.
Yeah.
We're giving you the whether it's negative or positive feedback. We're giving you this feedback to help you progress next time.
Yeah.
Right, because we do maybe we'll still want you in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I also feel like as you get older, honesty is always the best policy. When you're younger, you're trying to keep people happy. You're trying to tell people what they think
what they want to hear. Yeah.
And as you get older, you realize that actually it's easier just to like let people make that decision for themselves instead of trying to influence certain important decisions like that, and then giving yourself the opportunity to explain yourself.
Yeah.
And I always find like, have you ever noticed some people will answer a question in two ways? They will say, you'll ask them a yes or no question, and they won't say yes or no. They'll explain and then say the answer, and I always prefer the yes or no
justification.
They
have to. Everyone has to justify their response.
But they always start with the justification. That's so annoying. Yeah. Like, okay,
just get to the point.
My answer's at the end.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to it first.
Although actually, my kids, they're 9 and 11. But when I ask them a question, and again, similarly like yes or no, they don't feel like they have anything to prove. So they'll just give you a yes or no answer, but with no justification.
Mate, you're lucky, my son.
Yeah, that's a good thing, no?
It is.
Issa just goes, huh?
Yeah. You never get the why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, yes,
Straight to the
no,
point.
That's it.
Yeah.
We'll
I
get
like
back
that.
to what I'm doing now.
I like that. You know, that's a good skill to have. I think being direct.
Yeah, well, they haven't been corrupted yet through the working life. That's probably why they don't feel like they need to prove themselves.
Keep it that way.
Keep it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, listen, as long as you can.
Yeah.
Look, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been
you.
amazing.
Yeah, likewise.
We've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
nice.
Yeah.
And if you have, please, again, you know, like, share, so please subscribe and comment. Very important. We really, really would like to hear feedback from our listeners.
Yeah, let us know what you think, what we should be covering next time in our next episode. So until next time.
Until next time, we are excited.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, guys. You're going to want to watch our episode with Jack Bansal, where we talk about promotions and navigating through work. Please click and subscribe.